أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ياسين والقرآن الحكيم، إنك لمن المرسلين على صراط مستقيم، تنزيل العزيز الرحيم، لتنذر قوما ما أنذر آباؤهم فهم غافلون. لقد حق القول على أكثرهم فهم لا يؤمنون. إنا جعلنا في أعناقهم أغلالا فهي إلى الأذقان فهم مقمحون. وجعلنا من بين أيديهم سدا ومن خلفهم سدا فأغشيناهم فهم لا يبصرون. وسواء عليهم أأنذرتهم أم لم تنذرهم لا يؤمنون. إنما تنذر من اتبع الذكر وخشي الرحمن بالغيب، فبشره بمغفرة وأجر كريم. إنا نحن نحيي الموتى ونكتب ما قدموا وآثارهم، وكل شيء أحصيناه في إمام مبين. واضرب لهم مثلا أصحاب القرية إذ جاءها المرسلون، إذ أرسلنا إليهم اثنين فكذبوهما فعززنا بثالث فقالوا إنا إليكم مرسلون. قالوا ما أنتم إلا بشر مثلنا وما أنزل الرحمن من شيء إن أنتم إلا تكذبون. قالوا ربنا يعلم إنا إليكم لمرسلون وما علينا إلا البلاغ المبين. قالوا إنا تطيرنا بكم لئن لم تنتهوا لنرجمنكم وليمسنكم منا عذاب أليم. قالوا طائركم معكم أئن ذكرتم بل أنتم قوم مسرفون. وجاء من أقصى المدينة رجل يسعى قال يا قوم اتبعوا من لا يسألكم أجرا وهم مهتدون. وما لي لا أعبد الذي فطرني وإليه ترجعون. أأتخذ من دونه آلهة إن يردني الرحمن بضر لا تغني عني شفاعتهم شيئا ولا ينقذون. إني إذا لفي ضلال مبين. إني آمنت بربكم فاسمعون. قيل ادخل الجنة قال يا ليت قومي يعلمون بما غفر لي ربي وجعلني من المكرمين. وما أنزلنا على قومه من بعده من جند من السماء وما كنا منزلين. إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم خامدون. يا حسرة على العباد ما يأتيهم من رسول إلا كانوا به يستهزئون. ألم يروا كم أهلكنا قبلهم من القرون أنهم إليهم لا يرجعون. وإن كل لما جميع لدينا محضرون. وآية لهم الأرض الميتة أحييناها وأخرجنا منها حبا فمنه يأكلون. وجعلنا فيها جنات من نخيل وأعناب وفجرنا فيها من العيون ليأكلوا من ثمره وما عملته أيديهم أفلا يشكرون. سبحان الذي خلق الأزواج كلها مما تنبت الأرض ومن أنفسهم ومما لا يعلمون. وآية لهم الليل نسلخ منه النهار فإذا هم مظلمون. والشمس تجري لمستقر لها ذلك تقدير العزيز العليم. والقمر قدرناه منازل حتى عاد كالعرجون القديم. لا الشمس ينبغي لها أن تدرك القمر ولا الليل سابق النهار وكل في فلك يسبحون. وآية لهم أنا حملنا ذريتهم في الفلك المشحون وخلقنا لهم من مثله ما يركبون وإن نشأ نغرقهم فلا صريخ لهم ولا هم ينقذون إلا رحمة منا ومتاعا إلى حين. وإذا قيل لهم اتقوا ما بين أيديكم وما خلفكم لعلكم ترحمون وما تأتيهم من آية من آيات ربهم إلا كانوا عنها معرضين. وإذا قيل لهم أنفقوا مما رزقكم الله قال الذين كفروا للذين آمنوا أنطعم من لو يشاء الله أطعمه إن أنتم إلا في ضلال مبين. ويقولون متى هذا الوعد إن كنتم صادقين ما ينظرون إلا صيحة واحدة تأخذهم وهم يخصمون فلا يستطيعون توصية ولا إلى أهلهم يرجعون. ونفخ في الصور فإذا هم من الأجداث إلى ربهم ينصلون. قالوا يا ويلنا من بعثنا من مرقدنا هذا ما وعد الرحمن وصدق المرسلون إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم جميع لدينا محضرون. فاليوم لا تظلم نفس شيئا ولا تجزون إلا ما كنتم تعملون. إن أصحاب الجنة اليوم في شغل فاكهون هم وأزواجهم في ظلال على الأرائك متكئون لهم فيها فاكهة ولهم ما يدعون سلام قولا من رب رحيم. وامتازوا اليوم أيها المجرمون ألم أعهد إليكم يا بني آدم ألا تعبدوا الشيطان إنه لكم عدو مبين وأن اعبدوني هذا صراط مستقيم. ولقد أضل منكم جبلا كثيرا أفلم تكونوا تعقلون. هذه جهنم التي كنتم توعدون اصلوها اليوم بما كنتم تكفرون. اليوم نختم على أفواههم وتكلمنا أيديهم وتشهد أرجلهم بما كانوا يكسبون. ولو نشاء لطمسنا على أعينهم فاستبقوا الصراط فأنا يبصرون. ولو نشاء لمسخناهم على مكانتهم فما استطاعوا مضيا ولا يرجعون. ومن نعمره ننكسه في الخلق أفلا يعقلون. وما علمناه الشعر وما ينبغي له إن هو إلا ذكر وقرآن مبين لينذر من كان حيا ويهق القول على الكافرين. أولم يروا أنا خلقنا لهم مما عملت أيدينا أنعاما فهم لها مالكون وذللناها لهم فمنها ركوبهم ومنها يأكلون ولهم فيها منافع ومشارب أفلا يشكرون. واتخذوا من دون الله آلهة لعلهم ينصرون لا يستطيعون نصرهم وهم لهم جند محضرون. فلا يحزنك قولهم إنا نعلم ما يسرون وما يعلنون. أولم ير الإنسان أنا خلقناه من نطفة فإذا هو خصيم مبين وضرب لنا مثلا ونسي خلقه قال من يحيي العظام وهي رميم قل يحييها الذي أنشأها أول مرة وهو بكل وهو بكل خلق عليم الذي جعل لكم من الشجر الأخضر نارا فإذا أنتم منه توقدون. أوليس الذي خلق السماوات والأرض بقادر على أن يخلق مثلهم بلى وهو الخلاق العليم. إنما أمره إذا أراد شيئا أن يقول له كن فيكون فسبحان الذي بيده ملكوت كل شيء وإليه ترجعون. صدق الله العلي العظيم. Please recite a Surah Fatiha for Marhum Qasim Ali Ganji.
خوشنودی امام زمانہ بآواز بلند صلوات اللہم صلی علی محمد وعلی محمد سینہ شبیر ہے اور زانوے جلاد ہے مجرئی سوکھا گلا اور خنجر فولاد سرد پانی تم پیو رو ہماری پیاس پر ذبح کرنا تشن لب یہ شمر کا ایجاد ہے لاش قاسم جب ہوئی دیکھ کر اکبر کو آپس میں لعینوں نے کہا اس جواں کا سر وہ کاٹے جو کہ بے اولاد ہے عید کا دن ہے گلے ملتے ہیں خنجر سے حسین انشکیوں میں صاف واضح مبارک باد ہے چل گئی گردن تو آہ گر کے عابد نے کہا سخت باری ناتواں کو یہ جلاد ہے تیر مارا حلق اصغر پر تو شہ نے یوں کہا دل تیرا اے حرملا پتھر ہے تو یا فولاد ہے شاہ کہتے تھے نہ بھولے گا کبھی اصغر کدا اس کو سمجھے گا وہی جو صاحب اولاد ہے بولے عابد کیا مجھے قائل کرے گا تو یزید میرا دادا حضرت جبریل کا استاد ہے ان دنوں میں قید ہے یہ آپ کا ذاکر دبیر کیجئے اس کی مدد یہ آپ سے فریاد ہے سینہ شبیر ہے اور زانوے جلاد ہے مجرئی سوکھا گلا اور خنجر فولاد ہے ارواح المؤمنین والمؤمنات ثواب الفاتحہ على الخصوص آغا مهدي الششتري أكبر لي راج محمد قاسم لي گانجي الفاتحة
رحم الله من قرأ سورة الفاتحة بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله والصلاة والسلام على إمام القبلتين ونبي الحرمين وأفضل الثقلين وجد الحسن والحسين الذي سمي في السماء بأحمد وفي الأرض بأبي القاسم محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين أما بعد فقد قال الإمام الحسين عليه السلام قد بعثت إليكم أخي وابن عمي وثقتي من أهل بيتي صدق مولانا أبا عبد الله عليه السلام اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد اللهم صل وسلم وزد وبارك على صاحب الدعوة النبوية والسولة الحيدرية والإسمة الفاطمية والحلم الحسنية والشجاعة الحسينية والإبادة السجادية والمعاطر الباقرية والآثار الجعفرية والعلوم الكاذمية والحجج الردبية والجود الثقبية والنقابة النقوية والهيبة الأسكرية والغيبة الإلهية اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. The date which we have approached is the 9th of Dhul Hijjah, and it's a night where we remember the martyrdom of Hazrat Muslim ibn Aqil. In the moment of Sayyid al-Shuhada, from Medina to Karbala, you find that the first drops of martyrdom which were spilt upon the ground was the blood of Muslim ibn Aqil. Within this way, that really this day is a commencement of the remembrance which will take place in the month of Muharram. And we remember this individual who was praised by Sayyid al-Shuhada in particularly a unique way. Because when Imam al-Hussein was in Medina, you find various people, they would write to Sayyid al-Shuhada from Kufa. And the works of history state the numbers, they differ, but there were 18,000 letters, according to certain accounts, that were sent to Imam al-Hussein from Kufa. And each of these letters had multiple individuals who had signed off on them. And each of them said that we don't have an imam, a guide over us. Can you come towards Kufa? And we are ready to revolt against Ibn Ziyad. You find Sayyid al-Shuhada, when he replies to these individuals, he sends them, number one, his ambassador, Muslim ibn Aqil. And when he sends Hazrat Muslim, he writes a letter, and in that letter it was written, قد بعثت إليكم أخي وابن أمي وثقتي من أهل بيتي. The first quality which Sayyid al-Shuhada, he describes Muslim by, is that he says that I am sending my brother. Then he says, number two, I am sending the son of my uncle. And number three, I am sending the trustworthy one from Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. You see, when Sayyid al-Shuhada, he says that I am sending my brother, this is not just a description of lineage, because the second part which he says in the description about Muslim bin Aqil is that he says he is the son of my uncle. So in the second statement of the Imam, his lineage and his relationship with Muslim bin Aqil, it was established. But over here, when he says Muslim bin Aqil is my brother, you find that Sayyid al-Shuhada goes to show that there is a bond of ukhuwa and brotherhood between Muslim ibn Aqil and Sayyid al-Shuhada. You see, whenever there is a divine guide, there are individuals whom God has blessed to support that divine guide within each time period. You know, it's stated that within the time period of Nabi Yusuf, when the brothers of Yusuf, they threw Yusuf within the well, before they threw him, they would discuss. One of them would say, let's kill him. Another of them would say, no, let's burn him. But you find there was a brother of Yusuf by the name of Lavi. This is that brother who said, no, throw him in the well. If you're going to do anything, don't kill him, don't burn him. It's stated that when Yusuf was passing away and he was upon his deathbed, he gathers all of his brothers. When he gathers all of his brothers, he says to them, a time will come where there will be a tyrannical ruler. That ruler, his name, his title would be Pharaoh, he would be Pharaoh. And within that time, there will be a prophet by the name of Musa, and Musa will be the savior of the people. And that Musa will be from the lineage of my brother Lavi. You see that God gave a blessing towards this individual. Why? He supported a prophet of God. When he supported that prophet of God, Allah, he shows that I have a principle that not only do I bless that individual, I bless the lineage of that individual. That Allah, he sends Moses from the lineage of Lavi. In the same way, when Rasulullah was there, you find that in that time period, the supporter of Rasulullah was Abu Talib alayhi salam. So in return for the effort of Abu Talib, Allah, not only does he place Amir al-Mu'mineen within the lineage of Abu Talib, but you find 12 Imams come from the lineage of Abu Talib. And you find from the lineage of the supporter of the Prophet, you have Muslim ibn Aqil ibn Abi Talib. That you know who is the father of Muslim. The father of Muslim was that individual that when Amir al-Mu'mineen, he says to Aqil within the mosque that I want to marry a woman who comes from a family of warriors in order that there can be someone to support my Hussein on the day of Ashura. When Amir al-Mu'mineen says this, you find Aqil, he gives sincere advice to the Imam. He says, marry Fatima bint Hizam al-Kilabiyya. And you find that this sincere advisor to the Imam, his son was Muslim bin Aqil. You know, there's a tradition of Imam Zainul Abidin where they said to Imam Zainul Abidin is that why do you shed so many tears over the children of Aqil? You find Imam Zainul Abidin replies by saying that they gave more sacrifices than anyone else. You see, the children of Aqil, all of them, they were killed in the path of Sayyid al-Shuhada, whether it was on the day of Ashura or whether it was Muslim who was killed during this time period when Hajj was going on the eve of Arafat. You see, what is this eve of Arafah that the Muslims on this holy night, you find that they killed the deputy and the specified deputy of the Imam. Because deputyship is of two types. You can have general deputyship, but then there is specific and specified honor which a person receives, and Muslim had that specified honor. You see, on this night, which it is stated upon this night that the mercy of Allah is increased upon this night. That this is that night and the day of Arafah, the following day, where you find that God has increased his forgiveness. He has increased his mercy. And when many scholars, they speak about the day of Arafah, they compare it to the night of Qadr. Because upon this day it is stated, the one who asks from Allah, the doors of the heavens, not only are they open for those who believe, but they're open for other individuals as well. You know, it's stated that one of the recommended acts of this day is fasting. There is a tradition which is recorded that says, and this tradition is from various imams, it says, وَفِي تِسْعِ مِنْ ذِي الْحِجَّةِ Unzilat Tawbatu Dawood. It says that upon the 9th of Dhul Hijjah, this day which we're approaching and the night which we've entered upon, on the 9th of Dhul Hijjah, you find that God had given forgiveness towards Dawood upon this day. And it stated, Faman Sama Dalik al Yom, that the one who fasts upon this day, this is the atonement for 90 years worth of sinning. That the one who fasts upon this day, you find it is an atonement for 90 years worth of sins. This is the greatness of the day of Arafah. But you know, there's something which is very interesting, that when you look at the early works of hadith, for example, there's the famous book Iqbal al-A'mal by Sayyid ibn Tawus, and you examine the narrations about fasting on the day of Arafah, you find that there are certain traditions which emphasize it, but then there are certain traditions which show that it is discouraged. And the question comes up is that how do we make do by both of these traditions? Do they conflict with each other? You find I just gave you an example of this tradition which emphasizes fasting on the day of Arafah. But there is another tradition where a man, he states that upon the day of Arafah, and it's stated, he narrates from Imam as-Sadiq, that Imam as-Sadiq, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi, he says that the Prophet of God gave a wasiyah for Amir al-Mu'mineen. And Amir al-Mu'mineen, he gave that wasiyah to Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein. So what was that wasiyah? It stated that Imam al-Hassan, one day when he was the Imam, it was the day of Arafah. فَدَّخَلَ عَلَى الْحَسَنِ وَهُوَ يَتَغَدِّي وَالْحُسَيْنِ صَائِمٌ. It stated that on the day of Arafah, Imam al-Hassan was eating and Imam al-Hussein was fasting. That man, he says, that during the imamat of Imam al-Hussein, I went and I visited Imam al-Hussein on the day of Arafah. When I visited Imam al-Hussein on the day of Arafah, I saw that Imam al-Hussein was Imam al-Hussein was eating, and Imam Zainul Abidin was fasting. So during the imamat of Imam al-Hassan was eating on the day of Arafah, and Imam al-Hussein was fasting. And during the imamat of Imam al-Hussein was eating on the day of Arafah, and Imam Zainul Abidin was fasting. So the man, he asked that what is the meaning of this? What is the secret behind this? You find he says that inni dakhaltu ala al-Hasani yataghaddi wa anta sa'imun. He says, oh Imam, in the time period of Imam al-Hassan, I came towards you. Imam al-Hassan was fasting, Imam al-Hassan was eating, and you were fasting. But when I enter upon you today, you are fasting, and your son Ali ibn al-Hussein, you are eating, and your son Ali ibn al-Hussein is fasting. Imam al-Hussein, he says that the reason that the Imam is the one who is fasting, who's not fasting, is because he does not want the people to despair upon this day and go through difficulties. What this means is that upon this day, it is recommended for a person to fast. But afdal than that, the greater goal than that, is for a person to connect with God through the mediation of dua. If that fast upon this day is something which distracts you from supplication, then don't fast. Otherwise, it is an extremely recommended act upon this day of Arafah. That even when you look at the word Arafah, you find that it goes to show a sir and a secret. You see, there are different opinions why this day was called the day of Arafah. And of course, this is related to the word ma'rifah, which is recognition. And one opinion says that upon the plains of Arafah, that is the place where Adam and Eve, they met for the first time after descending upon the earth, and that was the place of meeting. No, a second tradition, it says that when Jibreel was explaining the rites of Hajj towards Ibrahim, Jibreel says that, "O Ibrahim, a'tarif bidanbik," that recognize and confess wrongdoing upon this day. Of course, Hazrat Ibrahim is a prophet who is infallible, but the message is for us. And from this word a'tiraf, to confess, to mention one's sins, you find that the word Arafah is related towards it. So upon this day, you find the aspect of dua is important. You find that the aspect of supplication and fasting is important, but not at the expense of distracting oneself from dua. But then the traditions, they mention something else. The traditions, they say that upon this day, one of the important acts for an individual is to recognize the Imam. Because fundamentally, when you have a day where one is seeking to connect with God, that connection, it occurs via the Imams of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. But upon the day of Arafah, you find that there is a special emphasis which has been given upon this aspect of the spiritual life of an individual. It's stated within the early hadith sources that upon the day of Arafah, Shaykh al-Kulaini, he narrates that the people, they would see Imam as-Sadiq. And Imam as-Sadiq, he would come out and he would be speaking loudly upon the loudest of his voices. That Imam as-Sadiq, using the loudest of his voice upon the day of Arafah, he would say, Ayyuhan nas, inna Rasulallahi kana al-imam, thumma kana Ali ibn Abi Talib, thumma al-Hasan, thumma al-Husayn, thumma Ali ibn al-Husayn, thumma Muhammad ibn Ali, and then I am the Imam. So upon the top of his voice, he would say that Rasulullah was the leader. Then after him, Amir al-Mu'mineen, then Imam Hassan, Imam Hussein, Imam Ali ibn al-Hussein, Imam Muhammad ibn Ali alayhim salam. And he would say this 3 times at the loudest of his voices on the plains of Arafah, 3 times in front of him, 3 times behind him, 3 times to his right, and 3 times to his left. And this is the type of emphasis that he gave on recognizing the Imam on the day of Arafah. And upon this day, you find that it is fundamentally, through history, it has been linked with Sayyid al-Shuhada. In what sense is this day linked with Sayyid al-Shuhada? You find from the first aspect, upon this day, we may remember the martyrdom of Muslim ibn al-Aqil, that the one who was the ambassador to the Imam was martyred upon this day. The second aspect linking this day with Sayyid al-Shuhada is that the Imam recited one of the most important supplications of the day of Arafah upon this day. The supplication of Sayyid al-Shuhada on the day of Arafah is one of the most wondrous du'as which have been left behind by Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. Now, all of the du'as of Ahlul Bayt are du'as worthy of reflection, but there are certain du'as that when you examine them, you find that they're in a league of their own. Du'as such as Du'a al-Kumail, du'as such as Du'a Abu Hamza al-Tumali, which Imam Zainul Abidin leaves behind. And you find from amongst those du'as is the dua of Sayyid al-Shuhada upon the day of Arafah. You see, upon this day, Imam al-Hussein, he showed the people that this is that day where you ask from Allah, and to such a point that Imam Zainul Abidin on the day of Arafah, he saw that that beggar, he was asking people for food. So Imam Zainul Abidin, he says to him, I'm surprised that you are asking from people on the day of Arafah, when this is that day where Allah will give towards you when you ask him. You see, on this day, Sayyid al-Shuhada, he gives a wondrous supplication. And it's a lengthy supplication. I don't have time to go through the entire thing, but there are certain portions which I can give an insight towards you, and that insight will show the value of reflecting over the supplications of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. You find at one point in the supplication, Sayyid al-Shuhada, he says, Allahumma ij'alni akhshaka anni arak. That, oh Allah, upon this day, make me fear you as if I see you. You see, Sayyid al-Shuhada, he says this line, that, oh Allah, allow my fear of you to be as if I see you, oh God. Naturally, a human being, when he sees another person in front of him, he behaves differently at times than when he is alone. That when another person is in front of you, at that point, you're more conscious of your actions. You're more vigilant of how you behave. You have more etiquette on a normal basis. But over here, Sayyid al-Shuhada is giving that realization, oh man, that have this fear of Allah. And of course, the fear of Allah is a term which really needs to be defined, because when you and I think of fear, our fear, it usually stems from the potential of us being harmed. That we'll fear a creature that can bite us, for example, or we'll fear an individual who can hurt us, a fear of a dhalim and oppressor. But the fear of God is a different type of fear. It is not a fear resulting from the potential of being harmed, but rather it is the fear of reverence. It is the fear of recognizing his grandeur. Sayyid al-Shuhada is saying that I want to have people develop that fear as if they see Allah. Now, Allah is so manifest that it requires that the eyes of a human being can't see him. But where the realm of the eyes they stop, you find the realm of the heart, it can see that reality of Allah according to the limited capacity of a human being. That's why the tradition, it says, Al-ahsanu an ta'budullaha ka'annaka tarahu fa'in lam takun yaraka. It says ahsan and virtue is that you worship Allah an ta'budullaha ka'annaka tarahu, as if you see him. But if you don't see Allah, then surely he sees you, O human being. That if we don't have that vigilance, that through the reality of our heart, which is the central place of perception, that we can recognize the manifest reality of God, then at the very minimum, recognize that Allah is the one who is seeing you. Imam al-Husayni says, Allahumma ij'alni akhshaka anni arak. And then he says, was'idni bi taqwak, that, oh Allah, make me happy and give me felicitousness through your taqwa, O Allah. This goes to show Sayyid al-Shuhada, in this very small two words, the Imam, he summarizes the success of a human being. And the Imam goes to show that if the human being wants to reach prosperity, that prosperity, it comes to God consciousness. Otherwise, this is the realm of that world where you find circumstances, they change in a second. One day you may have wealth, the next day you may not have it. One day you may have your health, the next day you may not have it. One day you may have your family members around you, the next day they may not be around you. And this is the reality of life, because the human being, when he seeks happiness, correct, that happiness is found in a state of permanence. But this is that world where it's stated that kullu shay'in halikun, that everything will be destroyed except the face of God, illa wajhahu. What does the face of God mean? What this means is that those realities that connect one to God, those aspects which allow us to see the manifest nature of God, that is a pathway which takes a human being towards success and happiness. Then after that, the Imam says, وَلَا تُشْكِنِي بِمَعْصِيَتِكَ, and oh Allah, do not make my life miserable through your sins and through disobeying you. You see, there are certain aspects in life which are a challenge. There are tests and trials. There are many things we can't control which make life difficult for us. But at that very least, because they're outside of our hands, you find it is a trial for us. But Imam al-Hussein is over here is saying that there is a form of misery which we bring upon us. And that form of misery, it arises from the fact that a person, he disobeys God. That yes, test and trial, a lot of times we can't control that. It's outside of our hands. But what is within our hands is that which brings us misery. You see, each line of Sayyid al-Shuhada within this dua, each of these lines, it requires unpacking. And when a person, he reflects over them, he understands the depth of each of these lines. Then after that, the Imam says, وَخِرْ لِي فِي قَضَائِكَ, that, oh Allah, give me good in your decree. وَبَارِكْ لِي فِي قَدَرِكَ, and oh Allah, bless your ordinances over me. حَتَّى لَا أُحِبْ تَعْجِيلَ مَا أَخَرْتَ, and oh Allah, to the point that I do not like the hastening of that which you have delayed for me, oh Allah. You see over here the Imam, he shows that a human being, that sometimes you may supplicate and God will give towards you, but there are times where he may delay that. And the true mu'min, that true sahibul iman, possessor of iman, is that person who recognizes that the human being, that he does not have full knowledge to understand what is best for him. So God, on days such as this, the day of Arafat, on nights such as this, God will give, but either he will delay or he will give you something better. And you find in this manner, this day of Arafah finds its second connection with Sayyid al-Shuhada. But the third connection of this day of Arafah with the Imam is that you find the ziyarah of Sayyid al-Shuhada was highly emphasized upon the day of Arafah. You know, it's stated in certain traditions that the one who does the ziyarah of Imam al-Hussein upon this day, it's as if he has gone to Hajj 1,000 times, 1,000 Umrah he has performed with the Prophet of God, and it's as if he has fought 1,000 battles with Rasulullah. Now the question it comes up is that why that has God given such a reward for the ziyarah of Imam al-Hussein? And this is something which a famous scholar who was the son-in-law of the famous Shi'i philosopher Mullah Sadra by the name of Faith Kashani, he writes about this issue. And he explains why is it that God put so much reward in the ziyarah of Sayyid al-Shuhada, and he explains it by using a hadith, a tradition. It's stated that one day, Imam al-Hasan, it was the time of Hajj, and Imam al-Hasan was doing tawaf. He was doing circumambulation around the Kaaba. When Imam al-Hasan was doing the circumambulation around the Kaaba, there was a beggar who was asking, and he didn't have any food. His clothing was tattered, and he didn't have any shoes upon his feet. When Imam al-Hasan, he saw this individual, Imam al-Hasan, he left that tawaf, he fed that individual, he gave clothing towards him, and he gave shoes towards him. You find that the companions, certain individuals, they said to Imam al-Hasan, that how can you, as the grandson of Rasulullah, leave the tawaf? You could have given towards that individual afterwards. Why did you do it right now? You left such an important act. Imam al-Hasan, he replies by saying that Hajj has 13 arkan. There are 13 fundamental acts in Hajj. I was performing one of them, which is the tawaf, which is the circumambulation. When you perform these 13 fundamental acts, you get the reward of one Hajj. But my grandfather Rasulullah, he said that the one who gives food to a hungry individual gets the reward of one Hajj. The one who gives clothing to a person who doesn't have clothing gets the reward of one Hajj. And the one who gives shoes to a person who doesn't have shoes gets the reward of one Hajj. He says when you perform the entire Hajj, you get the reward of one Hajj. but by this act over here, I gained the reward of 3 Hajj. And this was because of the generosity of an individual, he gained that reward. Now we come to the tradition that when it says on the day of Arafah, the reward for the ziyarah of Sayyid al-Shuhada is the reward of 1,000 Hajj, 1,000 Umrah. It is not because of us doing the ziyarah and because of our intrinsic value, but no, Allah, He loves generosity. When one is generous, God, He gives them an increase in reward. When Imam al-Hassan gave food and he gave clothing and he gave shoes towards that individual, he shows the sunnah of Rasulullah is for the person giving to be rewarded. Sayyid al-Shuhada didn't just give worldly necessities. Sayyid al-Shuhada, he gave everything for the guidance of humanity, for the guidance of the followers of the Ummah of the Prophet. And because of the fact that Sayyid al-Shuhada, he gives away everything, you find Allah in return gives to those who follow the path of Sayyid al-Shuhada. And what is the path of the Imam? You see, upon this day, we begin our reflection of the moment of Imam al-Hussein, because this is the day of the martyrdom of Muslim ibn Aqil. You see, Imam al-Hussein, he summarized his entire movement, and he summarized it in a famous wasiyah, which he leaves for Muhammad al-Hanafiya. And within that lengthy wasiyah, he says, وَإِنَّمَا خَرَجْتُ لِطَلَبِ الْإِسْلَامِ فِي أُمَّةِ جَدِّي صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَآلِهِ أريد أن آمر بالمعروف وأنهى عن المنكر وأسير بسيرة جدي وأبي علي ibn Abi Talib. The Imam, he says, the only reason I have departed is to reform the nation of my grandfather and to bid towards the good and to prohibit others from evil and to follow the footsteps of both my grandfather Rasulullah and my father Ali bin Abi Talib. Imam al-Hussein shows that his path is not just one dimensional, but if you want this entire path, then you follow the footsteps of Rasulullah as understood via Amir al-Mu'mineen. And you find there were a number of individuals in Kufa who followed these footsteps. Individuals such as Habib ibn Madahir, individuals such as Hani ibn al-Urwa, and many of them, they weren't able to support Muslim, either because of imprisonment or because they knew that this is one leg of the movement and it is our responsibility to be with our master Hussein on the day of Ashura. You see, Muslim bin Aqil, when he comes towards Kufa, you find that the people of Kufa initially they gave great support towards Muslim. But when this support for Muslim was increasing, you find that Yazid, he sends Ibn Ziyad towards Kufa. When Ibn Ziyad is sent towards Kufa, you find he begins to crack down on the people. Anyone who was associated with Muslim, either he would be jailed or he would be killed. And you find this state of affairs, it continued to such a point that history it records that at one point when Muslim would lead prayers within the mosque and people they would come to pray behind Muslim bin Aqil, for he is the ambassador of the grandson of Rasulullah. You find the traditions they would say that 18 to 20 and different numbers are mentioned, they would pray behind Muslim bin Aqil. But it stated a day it came where Muslim, he finishes Salatul Maghrib, the numbers, they decrease. He finishes Salatul Isha, the numbers, they decrease. It stated a point it comes that there were only a few people following Muslim bin Aqil as he was leaving the mosque. And when Muslim, he reaches the streets of Kufa, you find that there was no one there to support Muslim bin Aqil. You see, this is that Kufa where his uncle Ali bin Abi Talib would give justice from the city of Kufa. This is that Kufa where every house knew the name of Ali bin Abi Talib. And over here, you find a point it came where the nephew of Amir al-Mu'mineen, he is facing loneliness in the city of his uncle. You find Muslim bin Aqil, he would go through the streets and he would wander through the alleyways. No one would open their door for Muslim. Muslim doesn't have anywhere to go. Until a point it comes that he sits at the doorsteps of a house. When he sits at the doorsteps of a house, a lady by the name of Tawa, she comes out. She says, "Oh man, it is not appropriate for you as a stranger to be sitting at my doorstep." Muslim bin Aqil, he says that I don't have anywhere to go within the city. He says, "Do you have nowhere to go? Who are you?" He says, "I am Muslim." She says, "Muslim who?" He says, "Muslim ibn Aqil ibn Abi Talib." She says that you are the nephew of Ali bin Abi Talib. This lady, she takes Muslim in towards her home. You see, in the entire movement of Karbala, there were certain individuals that showed self-sacrifice. And this lady, although her mention isn't there oftentimes, but you find it's worthy of reflecting that what was her self-sacrifice, that she knew that history says her son was a supporter of Ibn Ziyad, and this would put her in difficulties. But when it came towards Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, she was willing to make this sacrifice, and many in history they did this. You know, it's stated within history that when many of the Hassani Sadat, when they went towards Morocco, there was a famous Hassani Sayyid who went to this town called Wujada, and the ruling party, they wanted to kill him. This Hassani Sayyid, he went into a house. When they knocked on the door looking for him, the one who owned the house, he said to his son that go and sacrifice yourself instead of this one who was from the lineage of Imam al-Hassan. So you find there are people like this in history who sacrificed themselves, and you find Tawa was this lady that she would put herself in harm's way for the support of Muslim ibn al-Aqil. You know, it's stated Muslim that night, he sees Amir al-Mu'mineen within his dreams. Amir al-Mu'mineen says, "Oh Muslim, your time has come." As Muslim, he sleeps after praying and doing wudu. You find the son of this lady, he notices that something is different within the home. She notices that somebody is within the home. Tawa, she says that no one is here. He says that no, who is this man? She says, "Oh my son, this is the nephew of Ali ibn Abi Talib, but don't tell Ibn al-Ziyad, don't tell him he is here." But you find that this individual, the son of the lady Tawa, he goes to Ibn Ziyad. He says, "I found Muslim. What is my reward?" You find that Ibn Ziyad, he sends different army troops towards Muslim bin Aqil. Muslim was a man who was valiant. He leaves the house. You find Muslim, when he leaves the house, they surround him. It was the way of the Arabs that those who were brave, they would fight one on one. But the army of Ibn Ziyad, they began to say that this is the nephew of Ja'far al-Tayyar. This is the nephew of Ali bin Abi Talib. They surround Muslim from all sides. They begin to throw rocks at Muslim until a point it comes where Muslim, he falls towards the ground. You know, when Muslim was in captivity, they take Muslim towards Ibn Ziyad. Muslim was given water, but as he was about to drink the water, you find blood, it falls in towards that cup. Muslim, he throws it away. Blood, it falls again, he throws it away. I say, oh Allah, you gave Muslim the pain of Aba Fadl Abbas, that pain of having water and not being able and throwing it away in the way of Sayyid al-Shuhada. A point it comes that they take Muslim on top of the Darul Imara. They cut the head of Muslim bin Aqil. Before Muslim he passes away, he says, Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah. Ala na'natullah ala al-qawm al-zalimin. Ya Allah, we ask upon this blessed night of Arafat, through the right of Muslim bin Aqil, that wherever the followers of Ahlul Bayt are in difficulty, help them. Wherever they're sick and ailing, cure them. Ya Allah, whoever has any specific hajat and is in dire need within these times, Ya Allah, if it is good for them, grant them these hajat. And Ya Allah, we pray for the hastening of the reappearance of the master of our time. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم. اللهم صل.
Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein. رستے میں سنی شہنے جس دم خبر مسلم، رستے میں سنی شہنے جس دم خبر مسلم، یعنی کہ کٹا تن سے کوفے میں سر مسلم، رستے میں سنی شہنے جس دم خبر مسلم، رستے میں سنی شہنے جس دم خبر مسلم، یعنی کہ کٹا تن سے کوفے میں سر، روتے تھے شہ عالم تھے سارے محاسن تم، روتے تھے شہ عالم تھے سارے محاسن تم، کہتے تھے حرم سے ہم اے نوحگر مسلم، رستے میں سنی شہنے جس دم خبر مسلم، رستے میں سنی شہنے جس دم خبر مسلم، یعنی کہ کٹا تن سے کوفے میں سر مسلم، واہ حسرتا و دردا قسمت میں لکھا تھا، واہ حسرت و دردا قسمت میں لکھا تھا، یہ داغ دکھائے گا مجھ کو سفر مسلم، رستے میں سنی شہنے جس دم خبر مسلم، رستے میں سنی شہنے جس دم خبر مسلم، یعنی کہ کٹا تن سے کوفے میں سر مسلم، ہے دل کو بڑا رونا مظلوم کی بیوہ کا، ہے دل کو بڑا رونا مظلوم کی بیوہ کا، کس طرح سناؤں گا اس کو خبر مسلم، رستے میں سنی شہنے جس دم خبر مسلم، رستے میں سنی شہنے جس دم خبر مسلم، یعنی کہ کٹا تن سے کوفے میں سر مسلم، کوفے میں جو جائیں گے سن سن جو یہ پائیں گے، کوفے میں جو جائیں گے سن سن جو یہ پائیں گے، کیا حال بتائیں گے نور نظر مسلم، رستے میں سنی شہنے جس دم خبر مسلم، رستے میں سنی شہنے جس دم خبر مسلم، یعنی کہ کٹا تن سے کوفے میں سر مسلم، راہ کربلا چلے ہیں آقا حسین جان، ساتھی نہیں بہت ساتھ چند عزیزان، راہ کربلا چلے ہیں آقا حسین جان، ساتھی نہیں بہت ساتھ چند عزیزان، اے شیعہ یا نزدیک ہے ماہ محرم، ماہ ازائے حسین ابن مرتضی، کربلائے کربلائے کرب و بلا، کربلائے کربلائے کرب و بلا کربلا کربلائے کرب و بلا صبح عاشور کو اکبر نے دی اذان لیلا پکاری بیٹا تیری آخری اذان صبح عاشور کو اکبر نے دی اذان لیلا پکاری بیٹا تیری آخری اذان بعد زہار تو نہ رہے گا اے میرے لال میدان برو فرزند میرے خدا نگہدار کربلائے کربلائے کرب و بلا کربلائے کربلائے کرب و بلا کربلائے کربلائے کرب و بلا خون ہے ناحق بہا کرب و بلا وہ خون ایمان خون پاک خون مصطفیٰ روز قیامت پہ تو رہے نا گواہ اے کربلا اے نینوا اے شاد فرات کربلائے کربلائے کرب و بلا کربلائے کربلائے کرب و بلا کربلائے کربلائے کرب و بلا سورۃ مبارکۃ الفاتحہ بسم اللہ الرحمن الرحیم اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد توجه زيارتك السلام عليك يا رسول الله السلام عليك يا نبي الله السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء السلام عليك يا حسن المجتبى السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك عليكم مني جميعا سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين خصوصا سيدي ومولاي أبا الفضل العباس وأختك زينب وبنتك سكينة جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته السلام عليك يا علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي السلام عليك يا مولانا يا صاحب العصر والزمان سيدي الأمان 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 السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن السلام عليك يا إمامنا وإمام الإنس والجان عجل الله تعالى فرجك وسهل الله تعالى مخرجك وظهور الأمر السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد